Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today I'm going to be giving you my April 2020 Senate election prediction. Now, I've already filled in the safe seats, and for those of you who don't normally watch my channel or this is your first time, welcome, and I don't do safe seats for flips. So Colorado and Alabama are as safe as can be, which is likely. Incumbents always have a built-in bias of sorts. So in Colorado, it is unlikely Senator Gardner will hold on to his seat, or in Alabama, Senator Jones. But there's always room for them to hold on in a surprising way. But this is how the election field lies. The Democrats hold an advantage going in with 46 seats. They only need to gain 5 in order to gain control of the Senate, while Republicans only have 40, needing to hold 11 of these seats. What are their chances? Let's dive right in with a few likely seats. And let's give the Republicans a bit of room over in Alaska. Alaska is a seat that many people like to put as safe because, well, Alaska always votes red, even though they historically don't. They have a strong history of having a bipartisan legislature and electing independents to statewide office. That seems like there's a strong chance it could happen again. Well, strong compared to safe. The Republican incumbent, Sullivan, has already proved to be a tad weaker than someone like Lisa Murkowski. He's more right-wing, less moderate, and that can hurt him not only with the natives, but the people of Juneau, Alaska as well. As such, as well as Anchorage, which can cost you in a Senate and statewide race. So, for now, it's likely. Another likely state that's going to give the Republicans a little bit of breathing room is Texas. Texas, many Democrats wish to be notably more competitive, but now that the primary is over and we're getting some actual, honest-to-God polling, Democrat versus Republican, we're starting to see that this race is going to be an uphill climb for the Democrats if they wish to win. While they have put money into Texas, it does not seem to be translating into a significant lead in the state. And this trend continues throughout the South. Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, and Kentucky. North Carolina is not likely Republican, and we'll get to why that is in a bit. But the entirety of the South is becoming... The best way to describe it is a rock in a mountainside. Right now, it's stable. You could step on it, move to the next rock, and there'll be a little bit of a wobble. And you might go for a moment, but it wouldn't actually fall. But that rock is wiggling more and more, and there's a risk it could fall. Statewide, why each case this is the case, Mississippi. I go back and forth on whether or not Mississippi is safe or likely Republican. However, with the coronavirus response and negative attitudes toward the current governor of the state of Mississippi, I'm going to give the Democrat a little bit more room. I think it's likely the state will be Republican, hence the choice of the name, but the Democratic challenger, Mike Espy, has shown a strong history of coming in much closer than Democrats have historically, and the gubernatorial race back in 2019 was closer than people expected as well. Meaning that if enough forces and money was mustered there, the Democrats could have a chance of taking the state of Mississippi. However, it's unlikely this will occur in this upcoming election. In Georgia is the state the Democrats want to flip, but they have not shown the capacity to do so yet. And I think there's a very simple reason why. Georgia, besides voter suppression, Georgia as a state requires suburban whites to flip to the Democratic Party. And what has happened is, in Georgia, suburban whites have been going more and more Democratic. And the urban area of Atlanta is growing. This state will be blue by 2024, I'm willing to bet. However, the question we're asking now is, will it be blue by 2020? I think the answer is no. It might be a tad purple. But those suburban white voters may not turn out for the Democrats fully in a presidential election. They may split their ballot. They might vote one way. They might vote for the president or as a Democrat and then Republicans to check the balance in the Senate. Or the reverse, that could also happen. I just don't see it as likely. Not to mention the incumbent Perdue has a strong positive name in the state of Georgia, meaning it's unlikely the state is going to flip to the Democrats this time around. And actually, for right now, I'm going to say roughly the same thing about the Georgia special election. I've been saying it's likely and even at some points tilt for a while now, or leans and some points tilt for a while now. But after some internal polling we got, as well with the most likely Republican being Collins as opposed to the incumbent Laufer, I can't exactly pronounce her name, she's currently embroiled in scandal. I think it's becoming less and less likely Democrats will take this seat in this upcoming election. If they do, great, more power to them, and probably the Senate, but frankly, this time around, I don't see it as a good chance. He's been showing strong numbers. Granted, we've only really had internal polling from all camps at this point, but strong numbers nonetheless. I think when we get to an actual two-man race, then we can start really making a call about this election. But until then, it's going to be very volatile. South Carolina, Lindsey Graham is not looking good with this coronavirus back and forth. And if you want my honest opinion, sometimes this seat is safe, sometimes it's likely. It's probably not going to get lower than that. But with coronavirus and Lindsey Graham's approval rating dropping, as well as the approval rating of the president dropping as well, and red states being hit harder than blue states, I can say Lindsey Graham is probably not as safe a seat as people thought he would, especially since polling is now showing him polling below 50%, while before he was pretty regularly breaking the 50% threshold. That's not a place you want to be when you are not only an incumbent, but a nationally known incumbent. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, state of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also is likely, to the point I don't think I can, with a clear mind, put it back to safe. The current Democratic governor has received wide-scale praise from Democrats, Republicans, independents, you name it, for how he has handled the coronavirus. And also, the state, Mitch McConnell, is one of the lowest approval ratings in the state. His opponent, McGrath, has done a very good job of campaigning so far. Not amazing, mind you, but a good job. Meaning, it's hard to make an argument that Mitch is totally stable. I think he will likely hold on to his seat. But if you're a Democrat, you can feel a bit more comfortable. The South is starting to wobble noticeably more. And with that, I actually want to make one side note about West Virginia. I'm not changing it from being safe. Don't worry, I'm not crazy. But I want to make a brief comment about challenger Richard Ojeda. I believe his first name is Richard. He's thrown his hat into the ring for the Senate race. And if he wins his primary, I could see West Virginia actually ending up looking a lot more like South Carolina or Mississippi, a state where the Republicans will likely hold, but Ojeda's got that very, for lack of a better term, Joe Manchin-esque vibe about him. Very salt of the earth, you're going to insult me, I'm going to punch you in the jaw, but in a sort of mediated way response. As such, I think what we're seeing here, and I will make a video about it in the future, the Republicans are losing the South, is the big message you should take away from this. Not the Democrats will win it in this upcoming election, but Republicans are starting to lose the South. Going into this with so many seats of theirs not safe is not a good sign, and while this has sort of evened things out, and there is one more likely state for Republicans, this is a really bad sign, especially if West Virginia ends up in that category. But let's give them one last likely seat, Iowa, and I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be comfortable considering Iowa a likely Republican seat, given how Governor Kim Reynolds has been handling the coronavirus problem, and the fact that Joni Ernst is already not the most popular senator in America, let alone Iowa. Chuck Grassley holds Iowa like nobody's business, however, you never know for Joni Ernst. and she's got what seems to be a solid set of challengers to her name. Now, for right now, Iowa's likely. I think Iowa's been trending more red. I don't like the talk of it being a purple state when it is so clearly going Republican such a solid amount of the time. Most of the last decade. I'm pretty sure the entirety of the last decade, actually. I don't think they went blue in 2012 for Barack Obama. So, yeah, you're witnessing the reddening of the prairies and the bluing of the South. This is going to be an interesting dynamic to keep track of. Because, also, it means as one southern state becomes more blue, the rest of them will become more blue as well. So if you're doing your own math in your head, keep in mind, trends are regional, not just for the state, but also for the region. If it's starting to look like, ooh, well, Georgia's notably more competitive for the Democrats in both of its races, then that means, and so is Kentucky, then that means South Carolina and Alabama and Mississippi and Texas are. Just trends to keep in mind. The Democrats, on the other hand, do not have as such good news. There is only one state which is likely for them right now, besides Colorado, and that's Michigan, and that's not a state they should feel comfortable about being likely. However, those of you who have watched previous predictions of mine, Michigan is up from being leans. And that's because, while the incumbent, Gary Peters, has not done a good job of polling above 50% in his election polling or swamping out his opponents like in the other safe blue states, he does, however, beat his opponent pretty regularly with usually between high single digits and mid to low double digits. That's a good place to be when you're the incumbent and you're in a state that already theoretically should be in the bag. Don't feel comfortable about putting it as safe yet because he is having trouble breaking 50% and sometimes even 45%, but 45% is a lot better than 30%. And as such, I'm willing to put Michigan in the likely category. So this is how the race really lines up, I'd say approximately 80% of the time. Republicans are going in with 48 seats, Democrats are going in with 47 seats, and these are our toss-ups. Now, if you haven't seen the channel before, I don't do toss-ups. I don't believe in them. I think state races rarely ever are right down the middle. I think, in practice, you can say they tilt or they lean one way. And, oh boy, do these tilt and lean. Let's start up with Montana. Montana was a safe red seat until Governor Bullock jumped into the race to win the Senate. Apparently, at quite a bit of pestering from Senator Chuck Schumer. Now, Bullock is very, very popular in the state, and we need to keep in mind Montana does have a history of electing statewide Democrats. However, the Senate is a different beast than the governorship. You can kind of separate the governor from the rest of politics, however, it's harder to separate the Senate from it. As such, for right now, Montana is going to be tilt Republican. It was originally leans, but now it's gone more tilt. With Bullock being in the race, we finally got some polling, and it is looking a lot tighter than people were expecting. However, I'll give it to the incumbent this time, incumbent in quotations, because incumbent in this case represents Republicans in the Senate. I don't believe the current Republican running for the Montana Senate seat is an incumbent. I'd hate to have screwed that up. But either way, let tilt Republican for right now. A similar story to Kansas, a seat that should be safe Republican, but has entered the tilt category. But instead of it being due to the Democrat this time, it's due to the Republican. And the simple response is the Republican is Chris Kobach. He is famous for losing elections in Kansas. Very popular, can win a primary, gets his ass beaten in the general election. Right now, I'll give him a tilt. The Senate seat was formerly Republican. And there's a solid chance that in a presidential election year, higher turnout, more people voting red at the presidential level, Chris Kobach could lose the Senate. However, remember that sort of split-ticket voting I mentioned in Georgia, put a check on the president? Well, if you already dislike the guy, in this case Chris Kobach, and you're voting for a red president, but you're also a little bit unsure about him, because you like your Democratic governor and what she's done, and you're feeling a bit uncomfortable about how Trump has handled this whole corona thing, well, you might just vote Democrat to balance things out. But for right now, this is ever so slightly in Kobach's court. We need a lot more polling. I actually think more polling should be done during the coronavirus case. You can do quite a bit of it from home, honestly. Because we need to figure out what these two races look like, because that's going to really clarify how the Senate is looking. Meanwhile, in Arizona, leans Democrat. This used to be tilt, it is now leans. We've seen poll after poll where challenger Mark Kelly is breaking 50%. Not consistently, and it is still a tight race, but you have to be on, and keep in mind this would also be flipping a seat, so the highest I'll let it go is likely. But, dear goodness, he is polling really well, and the incumbent, Martha McSally, is polling really poorly, especially after you consider how things went down in 2018, where she wasn't able to win the seat either. This was given to her as a sort of consolation prize. So, right now, Arizona is tilt blue. I think by the time we hit Election Day, I might be putting this thing as likely, given how well Mark Kelly is polling in the state. But it is also a state that has historically gone widely Republican. So, for right now, Arizona's tilt leans blue. We'll have to see how that changes over the next couple of months. Another leans blue state is North Carolina. I just saw a very good piece about a person arguing that, in fact, Georgia was going blue and North Carolina was more purple. I personally disagree with that. Georgia is a very purple state because it relies on a very new class of voters, which are suburban voters, for the most part, typically referred to as suburban whites, but you can argue there's a bit of a multiracial coalition, basically middle-class suburban persons. And as such, this is a very finicky group. And in Georgia, they can be outnumbered easily and have a longer history of voting Republican. While in North Carolina, they have shown to be going more and more Democrat, especially in the Research Triangle area. As such, I'm willing to put North Carolina as leans blue. I think when we get more polling out, especially with how poorly Tillis is polling, this thing could drop down, this thing could even get to likely, or it could drop down to tilt if he polls better than expected. But we'll have to see. Sounded like a chicken there. Sorry about that. Anyway, our last state, the state that will decide it all. Does it put the Senate in a tie, or does it put the Senate in the hands of the Republicans solidly, even if it's a tiny amount? And the answer is, puts it into a tie. Ever so slightly. Maine has been trending more and more blue in the polling. Susan Collins, one thought to be this bastion of moderate New England Republicans, has been getting torn down over and over again, with her approval ratings dropping and her numbers in the polls dropping even further. I like to think myself as a bit of ahead of this trend, because I was saying Maine was tilt Republican when many people were saying it was likely. But as we move forward, I think in the long term, Maine's going to actually end up being leans Democratic once we get some real polls out of the state and when we actually have people thinking about election time. So this is what we're left with. We're left with a tied Senate, and one that is not in a good place for Republicans, if I'm being honest. It's one thing to have a bad year and go, okay, we're tied. But we know in 2020, assuming Republicans do not end up with more than, I think, 54 seats, the Democrats take the Senate. And what we're witnessing here is they've got two really weak states here, while the Democrats only have one. If these two states break on Election Day, let's say there's another blue wave, Democrats slightly overperform, not massively, because keep in mind they did slightly overperform in 2018 compared to where people thought they would be based on the polling. If they do that again, then you end up with these two states flipping, going from tilt Republican to tilt Democrat. If that happens, the Senate's the Democrats. And all of these other races are window dressing. If you want to know what to watch on Election Day, it's Montana, Kansas, Arizona, North Carolina, and Maine. Mark my words. But Otherwise, if you liked the video, please leave a like down below, and while you're down there, feel free to leave a comment or a question. If you want to see more content from this channel, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell for when new content is released, so you'll be alerted. And, as always, have a wonderful day.